All right, so we're now on the steps for adding a drop shadow to text. It's steps 25 through 31 in my Google Slides lab for MSJC Introduction to Business Communications. Now what a drop shadow is it's going to take these nice light letters and it's going to put a dark shadow behind it so that it stands up even better against this background. It's a nice professional looking thing to do. It's really easy to do, so it's a great skill to have. Now, one thing that's important is before you make any changes to any element, that is what you have selected. In between recording the videos, I was playing around a little bit. So right now, my text boxes, the bullet section is actually what's selected. You can tell because I have that border around it with the resizing boxes. I want to be making changes right now to the text. So it's important that I click on that. Now it's what's selected. So now the changes that I make will be made to the title text and not the body text. All right, so step number 25. On the toolbar, select the Format Options button. And that's right here, this Format Options. I hover over that. Hovering just means I put my cursor over it and I don't click. So by hovering over it, you can see that it's called Format Options. And if that doesn't happen to be on your toolbar, you can just come over here to Format. This is also in the instructions. It says if the Format Options button isn't on your toolbar, go to the menu and choose Format. So I just left click on Format. And then it says Format Options. So I go to Format Options. And then when you click on that, over on the right-hand side of your screen, this Format Options window just showed up. Okay, so now we're on the next step. 26. In the Format Options window, put a check in the box to the right of Drop Shadow. You'll see Drop Shadow, and there's an empty checkbox over here on the right. You're just going to put a check mark in there. All right, so now there's a little drop shadow, and just to see what it looks like by default right now, I'm going to go ahead and click off of the title. And if you look closely, it now looks a little bit darker. Just to show you the contrast, I'm going to use the undo and the redo button really quickly. So right now this has a drop shadow. Now I'm going to click undo. And the drop shadow is gone. To redo it, you can see that it's a little bit darker and it stands out a little bit better. I do like the drop shadow, so I'm going to leave it right now with the redo. All right, so moving on to the next step, 27. In the Format Options window, sorry, let me select my title again, because if you don't have it selected, you're not going to see the options for what you're doing, okay? So always select it, and then you'll see the various options. So now we're back to where we were on step 27. So 27, in the Format Options window, left-click on the arrow to the left of the drop shadow. So here's drop shadow, and this is the arrow that I'm talking about that's in that lab. There's a little picture of it. So I'm going to left-click on this arrow right here, and that brings down a bunch of options, and that's what's written in the description section to the right in the lab. The drop shadow options will appear below the drop shadow line item. This is the drop shadow line item. These are the drop shadow options. All right, moving on to step 28. In the drop shadow options window, select the color button. Normally I actually like black, but just for what I'm demonstrating, I'm going to choose a much more kind of obnoxious color. Don't typically choose an obnoxious color, but I'm going to just use it so that you can see what happens. So I'm going to choose red, and that's all you have to do for step 28. So 29, you click on the new color for your drop shadow. You will likely have to click somewhere else in your slide to deselect the text box in order to see your color changes. Make sure you reselect the title text box by clicking on it to make more changes. So what I'm talking about here is you can see up in the title text, it's highlighted, so it's really hard to see any changes I've just made. So to see the color, you would want to go ahead and just click outside so that you can deselect it and then see the effects. So it's red. You can see that it's red, but it's not that distinct. So we're going to go ahead and play around with some of those options. All right, so I'm going to reselect it because that's what the instruction said to do if I want to make changes. And we're going to go ahead and play around with some of these functions. All right, so first I'm going to drop down the transparency. That makes it a little darker, so it's not as see-through, and you can see now that red is a lot stronger. I'm going to stick with that for now, just because I'm going to show you what things look like. Now the angle, if you change the angle, that will do things like bring it to the top. You can now see that the red shadow is on the top of my letters. If I bring that down here, now it's off to this sort of bottom right-hand side. So I tend to like mine about there. I tend to like my drop shadows to be facing about this direction. So coming down a little bit to the left of the letters. But it's entirely personal preference. I just like this. You could, it's perfectly reasonable to like something else. Distance, let me show you what this one does by bringing it way up. See, it drops that shadow way down here. Now, obviously, we don't want it that far away. So you bring that dial back down until it's a good distance that highlights your text, makes it stand out, but isn't too obvious. I'm going to bring it in a little bit more there. I think I kind of like that. I'm going to deselect it just to see if I like it. And I do. I like that distance. That's a good distance. Now blur radius. Let's go really strong again so you can see what it looks like. It's actually kind of hard to see what it looks like with that big of a blur distance. Let me bring it in a little bit more. So bring it to 31. You can see it's sort of making all the letters just glow. So what this is doing is it's called diffusing the color. It's making it stand out a lot more. It's making it a lot fuzzier. So if I bring that in again, down to a lower number, it's going to be a lot crisper. So you just find the exact level of sort of crispness versus blurriness that you like. And that's probably a little more than I want, so I'll bring it slightly down. There we go. All right, and I'm going to change the color back to something better, just because I don't actually like red. I just wanted to use that so that you could really see it stand out. So if you take a look at these letters, the black is pretty subtle. You can't see the black like immediately. You can tell it's there because it makes the letters nice and crisp. So that's what a drop shadow does, and it's a really useful tool for making your titles and anything else that you want, like maybe images. You can do drop shadows behind pictures, and the steps are all the same. You would just select your picture, add the drop shadow, and you can make it look like it's kind of standing off, like standing out from your slide, so it can look pretty nice. All right, so I think that we are now down to step 31. Optional, you can add drop shadow to your rectangle. I'm going to go ahead and do that just because I really do like the way it looks. So to do that, you just select your rectangle, and you want to make sure you're not selecting your text again, because if I had clicked anywhere even over here, it would still select the text. I want the rectangle, so I'm going to click outside, and now I know I've got the rectangle because that's what has these borders around it. So I'm going to go ahead and do the drop shadow again. Same procedure. I happen to still have the format options open. If I had not, then I would once again just click on format options and up it comes. So I'm going to add a drop shadow. I'm going to stick to black. Bring the transparency down a little bit for this one. Bring my angle to what I like. I will say that if you do a drop shadow on the text, you should stick to the same settings for anything else you put a drop shadow on, just so that everything is consistent. Bring up that distance a little bit. I'll make this one a little blurrier than I did for the letters because I just like it to stand out a little bit more. And let me see, transparency. Do I want it stronger or a little more subtle? I'll go a little more subtle on this one. All right, I think I like that. So now let me deselect by selecting somewhere else. And yeah, I kind of like that. All right, that works. All right, so now at this point, we have completely set up the titles for our slides. As you can see down here, this is still pretty ugly, and we'll get to that in some other steps in the future parts of this lab.